associate of the Redemptorists, Malcolm Salida from South Africa. He lives in Cape Town. He's married. He has 2 children. And he has joined us here at the General Chapter. And we're very grateful that you have come and came to join us and to participate in the General Chapter as a layperson close to the Redemptorists. Malcolm, could you briefly comment on how you came to know the Redemptorists?
Well, Mark, I grew up in a Redemptorist parish. Had a long association with the Redemptorists in Cape Town at the mother house in Cape Town, the monastery. And through my association with them, I was involved in altar service initially, and then later on in life was involved with the Redemptorist pastoral publications when we founded that communications house in Cape Town. And all along, I've sort of had this strong, inclination towards the Redemptorists. I love their preaching. I love their way of life. I love the way they were as human beings within our community.
Mm-hmm. And recently, you've been doing a lot of work throughout the entire continent of Africa with Redemptorists on finances. Can you explain some of what you're doing and why? Sure.
Well, I think that initiated with Cardinal-elect Joseph Tobin in 2007, he requested myself and Father Martin Gay at the time to go to the Congo to train some bursars on finance. And that was the start of financial bursar training within Africa. Recently, in the last few years, the conference structures were set up, and I had the opportunity of working within the Corium Finance and Development Commission under the auspices of Father Jerry O'Connor. And together we started building capacity within the units. We found that there were not many structures. Many bursars did not have even an office at a unit. And they needed not only financial support, but sometimes the mentorship. So we developed some courses. We've been personally visiting units across Africa and Madagascar.
And I'm not a financial person, so when I ask you this question, what gives you excitement about doing things in the finances for Redemptorists?
Well, I got into this by coincidence. I mean, after I left the Redemptorists in 1993, I specifically had to go and study something. My father made me go and study cost and management accounting. And it's always been an aspiration of mine to share my knowledge, experience, and skills with other people. Especially in Africa, I find that the financial systems are so weak and they're very manual at the moment. So what I've tried to do is I've tried to impart this upon others. And where I've seen it working, that has inspired me so much. Where I've seen bursars become unit bursars and community bursars on the other end, understanding a technological system and how more convenient this sort of system is for their own benefit.
Mm-hmm. Kind of reminds me when I first started with the Redemptorists in Canada, how everything was just kind of ad hoc. If you needed some cash, you got some cash.
And, absolutely.
And there was certainly no, I mean, we didn't have any problems, but there wasn't any real accountability. And today we have to be very careful, both for government reasons and for otherwise. So it's very special that you're doing this work in Africa and getting them up to speed so quickly. So thank you for that.
Yep.
Just a quick question in terms of the spirituality of St. Alphonsus and the Redemptorists. How does that appeal to you?
Well, I think the vow that sort of appealed to me mostly was the vow of poverty, and I think this has brought about my own great love for poor people, for people that are most abandoned. And in Africa, I mean, this is a strong phenomenon and something that I enjoy. I enjoy uplifting people. I enjoy working within social projects. And through the work that we're doing, not only on the finance side, but we are empowering our units and our confreres to work more strongly with the poor in their ministry, but at the same time implementing some social projects that is not only bringing relief to those units that are fragile, but at the same time bringing relief to their beneficiaries, the poor people that they're working with in these countries. And I remember a specific example in Ghana. We were just passing through a marketplace, and there was this child sitting around an open fire that was probably there from the night before. But this little child was so abandoned. And the memory and the vision of that child stays in my mind, and this is something that has sort of invoked me to try to work a bit harder at what I do, impart what I can on others, but at the same time try to find, you know, those most abandoned within each of the units.
It strikes me that unlike many of us in the first world, when we see, for example, a homeless person or a child, we turn the other way.
Yeah.
And you have to learn to see them in order to then make the commitment.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I mean, when I get home and back to the family, you know, after traveling in Africa for so long and not having the luxuries that we generally have in South Africa, I come back and even sometimes flushing a toilet, running water, electricity is such a luxury, you know, and I sometimes feel a bit out of place because I've become so used to life within Africa and the kind of work that we do.
Yeah, that's admirable to keep that up. What potential do you see for lay Redemptorist collaboration in the coming years?
Sure. Thank you, Mark, for asking that question. I think for me personally, I mean, it's such a joy to be at this General Chapter meeting, to be the representative for Africa and Madagascar, but more importantly, you know, to continue my vocation and also share my gifts and my talents with the congregation. I think as far as Africa and Madagascar goes, I mean, there's a lack of structures, there's a lack of openness to lay involvement. And whereas on the other hand, in other parts of the world, I see this actually growing. So my vision and my hope is that, I mean, through this meetings and also the vision that we have here, we can inspire African continent, African units to work more closely with lay people, especially in our fragile state.
That sounds exciting. Is there a Redemptorist that comes to your mind that kind of stands out for you in some of these things you've been involved in?
Sure. Well, I think if I just think short term in the last few years, I mean, Jerry O'Connor from Ireland, definitely. You know, we get called very funny names when we visit Africa because in Africa, the white man or the non-black person is seen as a sign of hope. And every time myself or Jerry visits, we get called all different African dialect names, but a sign of hope. But Jerry has inspired me so much. You know, he's really passionate about the poor, really passionate about empowering these units within Africa. And I mean, more than most, I think he's worked immensely hard, you know, to try to uplift the units, put necessary structures in place, but also be an assistance and a guide to them in their difficult times.
Yeah. We invited Jerry O'Connor to come to Canada for our chapter a couple of years ago so he could explain, for example, what's going on in Africa and the Fund for Africa and Madagascar. Sure. And I must say, some of our guys really caught fire on that. And it's partly because he's so professional, but it's also because he's so compassionate. So that's great. Any final comments before we wrap this up?
Oh, I think just lastly to say thank you to my Redemptorist conference, to the Conference of Africa and Madagascar, and the entire Redemptorist family, people that work not within leadership structures, but also those on the outskirts, those that are in the trenches doing various things. I think without them, I mean, you know, whatever we do within the congregation, within the worldwide community is not possible. So my thanks to each and every one of them, and, you know, encouragement to keep going. You know, hopefully my presence here is a sign and a hope to many others out there. Thank you.
Well, then in my turn, I'd like to thank you for joining us for this time at the General Chapter, because it really is a sign of hope for us. It also stretches us. It's very easy to get comfortable within structures of religious life. When we involve lay people, we find out that our structures don't necessarily fit them, but we can help them, but they can also teach us. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for all that you've shared with us. And may God continue to bless both you and your collaboration with the Redemptorists.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.